I know it's not super easy to get here today, but it is my pleasure to do this introduction today. Thorsten Nagelschmidt, born 1976 in West Germany, is an author, musician, and artist. Until 2009, he was the singer, lyricist, and guitarist of the band Muff Potter. He has had 3 novels and a collection of stories and photographs published and currently lives in Berlin. Tim DeMarco is a teacher, translator, and writer. He earned his bachelor's degree from Georgetown University and his master's degree from Middlebury College and currently lives in New Jersey. And today both of them will be talking about the new book, For What It's Worth. So without further ado, I will pass the proverbial mic off to them.
Thank you. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks for being here. This is my first time in Boston, and this is the first of my books to be translated in any language, but this one into English too. It's translated by this fine young man from DeMarco. Yeah. And I do a lot of readings in Germany, and so it's not easy to get translated into English from German, because obviously the English-speaking world is so big that you don't really need us. And yeah, it's nice that it's happened. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and this is my first translated novel. I mean, I've translated some of Thorsten's short stories, but this is the first full-length novel I translated. So it's there's a lot of new things. But it's fun, right? Okay, so I think we'd like to talk a little bit about the book, obviously, and we're going to read a few selections from the novel as well. But I want to give a quick background. Obviously, we learned a little bit about Thorsten. But to the book itself, the main character, the protagonist, Maise, is a 27-year-old grew up in East Berlin, who's now living in unified Berlin, or East Germany, who's now living in Berlin, and he inherits 15,000 euros from his father after his father dies. And he uses this money to travel. He wants to spend it as quickly as possible to get rid of the money and to live as his father never lived. When he gets back to Berlin, he's not really fitting back in. He's not getting back into the old rhythm. So he takes the remaining money he has left, 958 euros 50 cents. And
really, it's 50 cents?
It does, it's 50 cents.
Say that in the book?
It does.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
And I don't think I added that. I think that was...
I wrote this book in 2009. It came out in Germany in 2010, so he knows it better than me now.
So it's 958 euros and 50 cents. That 50 cents is important. Yeah. And he... Oh,
yeah, of course. Yeah, I know.
Is it? I just said that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, yeah. And so he travels to the Moselle Valley to visit Flo and his girlfriend Judith, who he met coincidentally while he was in New York, and spend some time at the vineyard there. And he's kind of confronted with everything he's never been confronted with in his life. Nuclear family, very job and career oriented, focused on roots, family, tradition, and Maise himself comes from a broken family. So while he's there, although it's not really, he's not offended by it, but it's just so very foreign to him that it doesn't work out very well for him.
Yeah, I like the idea that, I don't know if anyone, I know that he's been to Germany because I know him from Germany, but I don't know if anyone's been to Germany, but obviously there were 2 Germanys until 1989, the East and the West, and there was the wall. And I like the idea that Maise is kind of like a bohemian guy living in Berlin, the hip city, and knows hip people, works at a bar. And then he travels more or less the world, travels to the US too, and he doesn't have, but the real cultural shock he has is when he gets to the west of Germany, which is very, very different from Berlin. I think you could compare it. I know that people say that New York, for example, is very different to the rest of the US, or has nothing to do with, I don't know, the Midwest or whatever. And it's kind of like the same in Germany. Like Berlin is very, very different from the rest of Germany. So him coming from the East Berlin and coming to this very kind of conservative area of Germany, he has a bigger cultural shock than culture shock, is that
Culture shock.
Culture shock than he had on his whole travels.
Yeah. So I think we're going to read the scene.
Yeah.
Right? So the first scene we're going to read, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is on the first day that Maisa is in Penn. So he just arrives, and that first evening he does a wine tasting in the basement of the Admiral family's vineyard. And we kind of get an insight into who this family is that he's staying with. And we see a little bit how Maisa he really has some communication issues. He doesn't speak much in the novel at all. And everything
But he has a very strong opinion on everything.
He's super opinionated, but he doesn't really say much of it. And everything that he expresses is written in a different font, and it's in a monologue. And what he does actually say is usually monosyllabic or pretty biting. And we kind of get a little feel for that in this section. Okay. The wood panel tasting room reminds me of a hobby room at Aunt Helena's in Jena. The only difference is that everything here has something to do with wine. The pictures on the wall all depict vines, whether they're drawings, paintings, or photographs. Above the long table where we're seated hangs a cloth embroidered with the Theodor Storm poem. Clouds gathered, treetops tossed and sway, the poorest wine and old, that we may turn this dreary day to gold. Yes, to gold. Judith lights a few candles and turns off the main light. Flo opens a few bottles with a huge corkscrew. The handle is made from wood from one of the vines, he says. Oh, wow, I say. Wine here, wine there, wine, wine, wine. I'm just happy there's finally something to drink after all that talking. A general rule of thumb is that you start with the driest wine and finish with the sweetest. The drier it is, the more alcohol it has, of course, he says, and pours the glasses half full. This is the 2007 Riesling Classic. It has an alcohol content of 11.5%, 9.1 grams of residual sugar per liter, and 5.8 grams acidity per liter. After the Classic, a Hochgewächs, a Cabinet, an Auslese, and a Spätlese were served. In the leaflet on the table, I read what the Arendt family notes about each wine. The one is a gift from God. The other is a special kind of cultural artifact. The next one expresses lifestyle. It doesn't mention exactly which lifestyle. Then there's a wine for the day's intense moments, which can mean quite a few things. Maybe it tastes particularly good right after you shot up heroin or split your partner's head with an axe. They would by all means be quite intense moments. But what sounds like a mixture of coded language and poetry book lyric is actually supposed to help someone rate a wine. I taste all the nuances, the off-dry, the fruity, the harmonious, the savory, the sweet and the mild, the compact and the clear, the smooth and the supple, the spicy and the tangy, the fine and the complex, the bold and the subtle, the sharp and the vibrant, the apple, the peach aroma, the hint of caramel, the strong earthly fragrance of stone fruits and citrus fruits, the slightly waxy reminiscence, the balanced maturity, the enormous density and spice, the present acidity, and the light mineral notes on the palate. But honestly, it all just tastes the same, like wine that's way too sweet with way too much carbonation. Besides, I'm evidently not used to any of this anymore, since I'm already a little tipsy after the fourth glass. And Flo hasn't even filled most of the glasses all the way, which presents a little problem for me. I can't ever finish a glass or cup completely. I always leave the dregs at the bottom of each, since that last sip is so gross, that feeling on the lips when there's just air left, the thought alone makes me cringe. I'm definitely not the only one in the world with this quirk. The amount of glasses I've cleaned at Radetzky every night can't just be coincidence. Most of the time, only one single sip is left over from the mini portions Flo is pouring, so I just top myself off. When we move on to the next wine, I just dunk the last sip into the spittoon, a little metal pail that reminds me of a tabletop trash can like the ones they sometimes have in hotels. Flo and Judith do the same, especially Flo, who sniffs and slurps each sip for an eternity, then dumps the rest of the glass out and we move on to the next wine. My little quirk goes unnoticed. Flo raves about how the wine tastes different from year to year. The temperature, the sun, the moon, the rain, the soil. He uses terms like naturalness, authenticity. He says that a good wine is an honest thing. He talks of balance, consistency, and singularity, of self-fulfillment and delicacy. And the whole time, I just did one thing. Awesome. Getting drunk. Wasted, whacked, wrecked, pickled, pissed, plastered, bombed, blitzed, blasted, basted, sloppy, sloshed, shit-faced, smashed, inebriated, annihilated, toasted, hammered, knackered, lacquered, on the sauce, off the wagon, fucked up, tie one on, toss one back, bend an arm up, wet the whistle.
Sorry, I have to explain. I'm not laughing at my own work. It's just it sounds very funny to me in English, and it's I think it's a. I mean, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, if you want to do it this way.
Was this an easy part for you to translate? Like all these words for getting drunk. I mean, it's kind of the same in German, but
about half of them I have some experience with drinking alcohol, and about half of them are pretty common. The other ones I had to start thinking, what are some good phrases? And then I wanted to make sure they kind of match, right? So wasted, whacked, wrecked, pickled, pissed, plastered.
Yeah, it's poetry.
So I tried to make that match because in the original, that little segment flowed really well. And I wanted to try to make it go as best as I could. And some of them I think aren't super common, but like
lacquer, I never heard.
Lacquer? Yeah, why not? Yeah. I mean, I really could just make things up and I could say, well, that's what I call it, right?
Yeah, I would. I'm not a native speaker. You could do anything.
Maybe I
Could have done it. Yeah, maybe you did.
That pleasant spinning in my head, finally. And now that my brain is comfortably resting in the soft sheets of alcohol and my muscles relax, I realize how tense I've been all day. I light a cigarette. The first drag tastes as good as ever. I inhale deeply and hold the smoke in my lungs before I exhale into the cloud with relish. The best thing in the world is a cigarette when you're tipsy. The buzz with the buzz. Sometimes it's if only smoking makes breathing worthwhile. Nicotine, the sweet refinement of an utterly boring and vital necessity. There's actually no smoking here, Flo says. He makes a face that should be saved when you have to tell someone they have a terminal illness or that someone has died. Oh, sorry, didn't even think of that, I say. I stand in the doorway leading to the yard. Since the air is so nice there and you can see the dark blue sky, I smoke a second one. Man, you really smoke like a chimney, says Flo, and I sit back down. Yeah, well, I say, since nothing more clever comes to mind. Flo and Judith definitely don't think too highly of smoking, which is something I have to get used to. In some places in the U.S., cigarettes are already considered a gateway drug. That's the reason for the ridiculous no alcohol in public rules. The worst thing is no more when you can't drink and smoke at the same time. The next one on the table is a noble ice wine, which, amongst other things, has won an award from the journal The Connoisseur. According to the leaflet, the wine is a poem, which in my opinion could be said about the leaflet itself, albeit a bad one. It apparently has a distinct matured flavor, partly reminiscent of candied citrus fruit and peaches with herbal and mineral notes, as well as subtle frost tones. The only thing I notice is that it's sweeter than anything we've tried so far. It doesn't taste that good to me, says Judith. I grin in her direction. Her eyes meet for a second. She raises the corner of her mouth. I guess that's her smile. I can't put my finger on this woman. I suspect some sort of superior intelligence behind her quiet eyes, and it makes me increasingly nervous that I don't really know what's going on inside her mind. And you, Judith, do you like wine? Oh, God, what a stupid question. How did I come up with such bullshit? Of course, she says. Of course. Nothing else. As I'm trying to think of how I can coax her out of her shell and start the conversation before Flo has the chance to continue his ice wine monologue, the cellar door flies open with a jolt. A man in a faded red sweater vest and dirty corduroy pants enters the tasting room.
I will take over from here, just a little bit long. The later it gets, the better looking the guests. Is there enough room here for an old vintner? That's got to be Flo's father. I estimate him to be late 50s, early 60s. He has playful eyes, big elephant ears that rest against his head, and a big red nose, like an alcoholic in a comic. I always get excited when a cliché is confirmed. They exist for a reason, after all. He takes a seat across from me and offers me his hand. Hubert, he says in the tone of a cheerful commander. Miser, I say, in the tone of someone who knows what comes next. Miser, he says, what kind of name is that? He taps his forehead repeatedly with his index finger and whistles some noise that today could would more be associated with copulation or taking ecstasy, but is obviously meant to mean some sort of mental problem. His eyes dart back and forth playfully to Flo and Judith and seem to say, "What a weirdo." "Dad," says Flo. I fake amusement and explain once again the origin of my nickname. Hubert doesn't listen to me at all. He pours himself a glass and raises it in the air. 3 cheers for Mosel wine, it welcomes you every time. Apparently, this is the Mosel version of don't sip it, tip it, and Hubert is one of those people who always has a funny saying on hand. These people are everywhere. They say things like, the early bird gets the worm, or if you buy cheap, you buy twice, without ever having confirmed if it's actually true. They start their sentences with, let's put it this way, and never shy away from silly plays on words such as having to shake a tower or to know my blows. They respond to complaints of, I'm hungry with wings and, hi hungry, I'm dead. There are no limits to these embarrassing phrases, whereas simple minds trudge through life with worldly wisdom such as, if you don't want to listen, you'll have to find out the hard way, or don't piss on my back and tell me that it's raining. The educated class says the same nonsense, but knows to follow it up by saying it's a quote from Oscar Wilde or Hermann Hesse. Who, being loved, is poor, or he who seeks the source must swim against the current. My father also had a soft spot for wordplay. His favorite expression was definitely, a cross between definitely and absolutely, and he loved bidding his customers farewell with the phrase, take it easy, but not too easy. Later in life, with regards to my mother, he spoke a lot of paying the piper, throwing a wrench in the gears, and how you can't have your cake and eat it too. Then I would stick my finger in my ears until, shaking his head bitterly and resigned, he would shut his mouth. Sometimes he would still mumble something like, when the chickens come home to roost, and then would go right back to his good mood like the flip of a switch. He only knew one joke. I can cook really well, just nobody can eat it. He offered that one up at every opportunity. Then he would look at you with wide, expecting eyes, even though you had already heard the joke 1,000 times. Whenever we were alone, I would laugh just to do him a favor, since he would only burst out laughing when his counterpart reacted. Whenever other people were around, I just felt uncomfortable about how he laughed so outrageously at his own joke, so I changed the subject or pretend that I had to go to the bathroom. It was a ritualistic merrymaking, a staged cheerfulness that had nothing to do with humor. But now, as I'm sitting in this wine cellar, drunk, I think that cooking jokes actually not so bad. Maybe my father would have gotten along quite well with Hubert, maybe not. To be honest, I don't know either of them enough to be able to tell. But at least now I know where Flo got his knack for expressions. He does not seem to be embarrassed by his father in the least bit. Even Judith is sitting there relaxed, with a smile on her face, as a future father-in-law fills our glasses and whispers to her conspiratorially. That's a hard one.
You said it right.
Conspiratorially. Mosel wine enjoyed, I say it again, and whispers to her conspiratorially, Mosel wine enjoyed in moderation is not harmful in large quantities. She laughs, Flo laughs, I laugh. Actions speak louder than words. Flo yells, cheers, 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 cheers.
Yeah, so I wanted to just go a little bit more, talk a little bit more about this whole idea of East Berlin or Metropolis Berlin and provincial small town life. And when you had the idea for this novel, why the Mosel Valley? Was it something that, do you think that this could have taken place somewhere else in Germany? Or did you think it has to be Mosel? Or why that region particularly?
Well, it doesn't have to be that region. I came there by coincidence, and I wanted to, this is my second novel of 4, and after I published my the first one was published, I had a few things that I thought I wanted to write about. but I didn't know where that they could take place, how I could. And then I was at the Moselle Valley as playing a show, playing a concert, and it wasn't even an intellectual decision. It was just like I just thought, okay, this is it. It was all there, and I myself come from a small town in the west. I'm not from the east, but my eye narrator is from the east, and I thought I want to write about this, like provincial West Germany, but not from my own perspective, but from the perspective of someone from big city, and also I wanted my hero to fail, and he really fails in this book. Yeah, we don't want to spoil the thing, but because I think it's very easy. It's very easy to make fun of these little provincial places, and Meise is kind of like, he's a little bit arrogant, I think, and he's a little bit above it all, and he looks down on these things, but he has a big problem that he can't express, and so I wanted to play with that. So at least for me as a reader, I always like interesting characters. I don't think a character necessarily has to be likable in every way. He has to be interesting or cheap. And and I thought all these topics like family life and coming from a broken family and not knowing what to do, not wanting this money from his father but having to spend it, and I really wanted him to fail, and I thought that was the perfect ground for that to happen.
Yeah, and I guess on the same token was that why you chose East Berlin as his origin? I mean, Berlin, I can understand. Was there something specific about, did you really want to show the difference between former East and West, or is there a particular reason behind East Berlin?
Well, before an editor came in, there was a lot more East-West things in the book, but this is not the main topic of the story. I just wanted it to be as far away from the Moselle Valley as possible. So Berlin was pretty far away already, but Meise is born in Eastern Berlin in '81, so he's a bit younger than me. But he was I think 7 or 8 when the war came down, and and I wanted it to be as far away from that as possible.
Okay. Did you want to do one more section?
Yeah. Do you want to start
Yeah,
that one and
so,
I take over again?
Well,
or the other one?
The lunch.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. Yeah. So just a little background. This is right. It's the day after the wine tasting, where did you want to do the?
No, that's good. Good.
Where
It's only the second day of our tour, a little tour. So
yeah, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. But so they Meise is invited to eat lunch with the family, which is a really foreign concept to him. As Thorsten had mentioned, he comes from a broken family, so the idea of sitting with the family and eating lunch together is a really kind of foreign concept. And the family is super friendly and super nice and welcoming. It's just so foreign to Meise, and like we mentioned before, he doesn't really communicate. And in this scene, they're asking a lot of questions about his life, and you can kind of see how his answers are real monosyllabic, and he doesn't really want to express much about himself.
yeah, and that gets the further we get into the book, or if someone wants to read it. That gets more and more of a problem. He's like a champagne bottle that's constantly being shaken. Is that? Can you say that?
Yeah. Sure.
And so his communication issues get a bigger and bigger problem during the book until there's a big showdown in the book where he can't take it anymore. And so in the book, there's Oh, you said that already, that they're in a different font, the
Yeah.
things, he really thinks, yeah.
But he doesn't say.
Yeah,
He keeps his mouth shut, and then, eventually when he has something to say, it all kind of comes out. But, okay. Yep.
Oh no, should we do this?
Here.
Yeah, this one?
Okay, sure. Yeah. All right, so this is after he has dinner with after he has lunch with the family, he doesn't talk the whole time. Real short answers, and then he finally, written in a different font, this is all inner monologue, where he's reflecting on his life and his lack of a family. I've only eaten with my parents once since I've been vegetarian. On my birthday over a year ago at an Italian restaurant in Richmond. I had absolutely no desire to meet each of them separately, so I invited them both to dinner. I figured if they didn't want to, whatever, and was pretty surprised that they both agreed without even bitching. Looking back, it was probably only because my dad was already so sick at that point, he didn't have any time for his pathological pride. Sylvia also joined us. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. Whenever Sylvia is around, everyone tried to compose themselves, since she's so reasonable. Sylvia is an authority. She stands above everyone. If we were to look up the word authority in a dictionary, we'd definitely see a picture of my sister. We hadn't sat at the table together in 15 years. Apart from the strangeness of the event itself, the evening ran rather unspectacularly. A bit of moaning and groaning about the service, which was, once again, not friendly enough for my father, and the customer is always right mentality, and the typical, what else is new conversations. Superficial chit-chat about this and that, the first few games of the Euro Cup, the weather, and so on and so forth. Sylvia told us a bit about her dissertation she was currently preparing for. Long, a conversation topic fit to fill an evening if you play it right. My mother thought it was all great, and my father thought it was all great, and all the while not really listening to her, just like me. We were just happy that someone else was talking. My mother drank a noticeable amount of wine by her standards. My father drank noticeably little, actually nothing besides water. He barely ate anything either. He didn't look good. Obviously, the question about his health hung in the air the whole time like a big dark cloud. We just simply ignored it. We don't talk about such things among strangers, because that's what we were, strangers. Albeit strangers with their common past. The kind of past which was never meant to be mentioned. It was like an egg and spoon race in a minefield. Every word a substitute for the things you could no longer communicate with words. A pure placeholder conversation. More shells than words. What was I thinking of inviting them all here together? Finally, the food was served. Something to occupy our hands and mouths. The clinking silverware gallantly filled the gaps of the conversation, which was getting longer and longer. I drank as much as I could. After the second glass, my mother's face was completely red. In contrast, my father was getting paler by the minute. Later, Sylvia started up the conversation about her dissertation out of pure awkwardness. She sacrificed herself, explaining all the details about the whole procedure, the extent and the content, European environmental rights and times of globalization. But she knew no one was actually listening to a single word. My parents had no clue what it was all about. Even I could barely keep up with it. Despite all this, I kept asking one dumb question after the other to keep the conversation going as long as possible. After the third glass of wine, my mother lost her ability to feign attention. She was under the impression that we couldn't just talk about Sylvia the whole time on my birthday, and, out of the blue, began asking me about my future. There wasn't much to talk about. No career, no girlfriend, no possessions, no plan, no desire. The topic had already been discussed years ago, so no idea why it needed to be brought up again. All of a sudden, it was about me dropping out of college. Journalism definitely would have been the right thing for me to study. I used to love writing as a kid. I would have been so talented. My father agreed with her. A rare harmony, born from the sole necessity to talk. I was annoyed. I felt like a stupid kid. But why? I mean, I was doing well. Both of them combined had never had the amount of fun I've had in my life. On the contrary, they had wasted their lives. Usually, they really had no right to tell me anything. I was drunk by the time the plates were cleared. But not a good drunk, a nice drunk or an easy drunk. Everything was heavy. The wine, the air, my shoulders. Everyone at the table knew that someone should say something yet, but no one did. Not even Sylvia. My big sister, the beacon of hope on a dark night, the rock in the surf, fit for any situation. She just sat there and grimaced me bitterly. Your turn to take care of the conversation, I said to me. It's your party, after all. I asked for the check. I had to reassure my mother 10 times that I could pay the whole amount. that I wasn't completely broke as she always thought. As she always thought I was, and that she shouldn't worry about me. We awkwardly hugged and went off in 4 different directions. The next time we were together was a few months later at my family's grave. I've always filed that evening under at least one at each other's throats. Just now I'm realizing how much of a sorry excuse for a family dinner it actually was. If I remember correctly, my father didn't even make his cooking dinner. I almost got run over by a car on the way home, but nothing happened. I think I went out drinking, or maybe I just went home. I don't remember.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think at this point, I don't know if anyone has any questions about it, or
Maybe you.
person? Do I have
Maybe I.
questions? But if you have questions, I mean, I guess one thing I could ask is, so I know as your background is in music and in art and in writing, and from what I understand, you didn't study literature or journalism, you never took lessons, you taught yourself everything. That being said, who, in terms of writing, who was it that you looked to for inspiration? So whether you were learning directly from these people, who did you try to channel when you decided that you wanted to write?
Well, this may sound trivial, but I started writing as soon as I could hold a pen, and so I made up stories. Like in Germany we have a weekly magazine called Bravo, a musical magazine with pop music. So I would copy that and make myself the singer of every band they wrote about. And then I started writing a journal, a diary, when I was 14, I think. And I do this to this day. I have 152 books. I just started book number 152 a few days ago. And I never read them. It's more or less, it's something I have to do, like a bit manic maybe. And then I did a fanzine in the 90s, like a punk rock fanzine called Wasted Paper. And there were 8 issues in 8 years, and by the end, the last 2 or 3 issues weren't so much about music anymore. It was more like writing what happened, your opinion on things. So then in 2005, someone called me, an agent, and said, "Hey, I really like your fanzine. Don't you want to do a book?" And I just said, "Yeah, well, of course." So I did my first book, which was pretty autobiographical. And it didn't, of course it's a big thing to write a book and to have a book published and to hold it in your hands, but the whole process of doing it wasn't much different to what I did before. It was, that's what I want to do. I also wrote the lyrics for my band, and I was always interested in language and words and poetry, if you will, mostly like song lyrics, which are very good poetry. And so this wasn't such a big step for me, and this is just my approach. I'm an autodidact, and I had the classical punk rock experience. There's this thing. Here's a chord, here's another chord, here's a third chord. Now form a band. And I literally had that, and I even remember which song it was. It was a song called Mother by a band called Danzig. Does anyone know? It has 3 chords. Dun, 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 dun. And then comes the chorus, and it's the same chords, just the other way around. And when I realized that on my shitty acoustic guitar, I thought, like, wow, then now I can write songs, And it was kind of, and I did, and it was kind of the same thing with writing, and I think that's how it should be. I don't know how it is in the US, but in Germany, there's still a very like highbrow literature culture, like a lot of people who write for newspapers, they give each other the prizes and everything, and it's changing a bit now, luckily, but I thought a lot of interesting things in art in general always came from people who just had to do it and who didn't know what they were doing. They were just trying, okay, I want to do this and I see how far I can get with it. And that was always like in music, in art, in literature, maybe not in architecture, but no, in most arts it was a lot of good things came out of that. And yeah, I think it's important that people just follow their passion and just do it.
Yeah, we have a question here.
Can you talk a little bit more about what compelled you to write this book? Because you said it's one of 4. Your first one sounds like was autobiographical, so is it an interest in intercultural communications? Because it sounds like you also identify with like the languages and art, so are there any life experiences that led you to this story?
That's an interesting question, but also a tough one for me because I think I really wanted to write. It wouldn't even matter so much what. I wouldn't publish anything that I wasn't sure of, but I really wanted I wanted to write. I wanted to sit down and write, and I was desperately trying to find not the topics, those I had, but how to put that together. Because, as I said, I never took creative writing classes or so, and the bad side of it is that it's a lot of trial and error. So I always have to, I think. So I always have to try a lot of things, and I didn't manage to get it done until I was at this place in the Moser Valley where I thought, okay, it all came together, and as I said, it wasn't really an intellectual thing, it was just something in the air. So honestly, I can't really answer that question. But also, I think, I don't know how it is for you or for anyone in the room. When I'm at a bookstore, this is a great bookstore, by the way. It's amazing. We walked in. This is my first time in Boston. We walked in, and I saw 10 books that I wanted to buy and read. Modest Mouse was playing, the band that I really like, and I saw there's a bar and they serve wine. And I thought, wow, this is heaven. What did I want to say?
I don't know what you wanted to say, but the question was about what compelled you to write this, if there was anything personal that
yeah, okay, I was somewhere else now, but
it's okay to say it's a great book, right? There's always no bad time to compliment.
Yeah. I know what I want to say. What I usually do in bookstores, what we all do is we take a book, we have heard something about it, we read the name or the title or I don't know, read a review or something, or maybe just the cover looks interesting or the title is interesting. Then we take it, we turn it around and read. This is very hard. I mean, this is like in publishing houses, they fight so much about what is here. It's horror. And for me, sometimes there's a specific topic I'm interested in, but mostly I read this and okay, it's about this and that, and I open a book and try and just somewhere, not necessarily the first page, but somewhere, and read a paragraph and to find out if the language does something to me, if the sound and the rhythm does something to me. So maybe that comes from I played in a band for such a long time, but I don't know. But
translation process and how you collaborated. You talked about the section with the translation of all the drums.
Yeah.
But were there other different sections where you really had to discuss how to convey?
We discussed quite a bit.
A lot. I mean, yeah, and I think I have to say, I mean, I have all these notes about because. So the whole idea is this is the first book I've translated. I guess I'm a translator now. I don't know. Maybe. But I never yeah, I guess I am. True. Right? I'm a German teacher. I'm really interested in the German language. And I studied abroad in Germany, and I I heard of his band, and I became a real big fan of his band. Then I knew he was writing, so I read his books. And I was always interested in translating, so I figured one day I was like, why not? So I translated a little bit of each of his books that were published at the time, and sent him an email and said, what do you think? And like,
that was really interesting. It was obviously there's a 6-hour difference from here to Berlin, so it was, I think it was around like 1:30 in the morning.
I wrote it right before I went to bed, because I was so nervous. I'm like, I want to click it and go to bed.
Yeah, I wanted to go to bed, and I just checked my mail one last time, and then there was this mail by someone called Tim DeMarco, never heard of, and he said, I translated one chapter of each of your 3 books. And of course I couldn't like go to bed and say, okay, I'll read it tomorrow. I was like, wow, what did you do? So I had to read all of them, and I was amazed that someone even did that. And to me, they sounded great. I'm not a native speaker, but they sounded great to me. And yeah.
So the way, so I mean, the way it worked is, and I would translate a chapter. And it's great just with the technology. I would translate a chapter on Google Docs and share it with him. And as you can tell, his English is pretty great. So he would read it, and he would point out certain things, and then, maybe we could do this differently, and I would kind of work on it, and then share it with him again, and then move on. But to get to your specific question, I mean, there are a ton of examples, but I think one of the biggest examples is the main character, his name is Tobias Meisen, but his nickname is Meisen. And that gets brought up a couple times, even in the section we read, the father taps his head like, what kind of stupid name is that? Because in German, when you ask someone, hast du eine Meise, it means like, do you have screws? Like, is something wrong with you? Are you nuts or whatever? So I was like, I can't, how do I translate that? Because Meise, we don't have that word in English. So the only thing I can think of, which changes the context a little bit, was, well, you don't have to be a miser, because a miser has to do with spending money and how you feel about spending money, and that's a big part of this book. So things like that, it's not a direct translation, and it doesn't necessarily have to work perfectly, but we agreed that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah,
instead of eliminating the joke completely, because there were a few things where we just kept the names. Some of the hair salon names, Kaiserschnitt. Like, it's a corny joke in German, but it doesn't translate as well. So some of them we left out, but some of them, like...
But I must say that Tim really did a great job, because it's the special, when we decided on what to do, and we decided on, okay, we're going to translate this book. We didn't have a publishing house to publish it. He just did it. And then we tried to find a publishing house, and it took us quite a while to because it's not easy.
The translations aren't very
from German to English, and we picked this one, and I said to Tim, "Wow, that's a tough pick, because in Hubert and Flo, they mostly talk in wordplays, like really silly ones. I think a lot of them are quite funny, so that's what I wanted to have in there too. Like it's really comic at points, and it's really tragic at other points. That's what I like." And but all those wordplays, some of them you couldn't translate them, so there was a lot of back and forth with that, and so I find that very interesting, because translation is really it's a creative process. You made something different, you know. You made this is
even the title itself. I mean, so there has to be, and I think. It was easy to work with Thorsten, because so many times he would tell me, Tim, like, step away from like the straight structure and word for word, like I kept saying, well, I don't want your voice to get lost, and he was saying, yeah, but like you can't do word for word. So he gave me a ton of creative license, where I had a lot of freedom to work with it, which was great, but I'm not a super creative person, so I'm like, great, I have all this creative freedom. What the hell am I doing with this now? So luckily I had some friends that helped me out and come up with some things. But yeah, I read this book in 2012, I want to say. 2013 I read it. In 2016 I started translating it. And I translated the first chapter. I was like, yeah, no problem. And when he was like, I don't know, Tim, I think that's going to be the hardest book to translate. I was like, well, out of the three things he translated, it was definitely the hardest, but I really like it the most. And it's like, yeah, but all those like idioms and stuff, aren't they going to be hard? I said, oh, it'll be easy. And then I got into it, and I was like, what did I do to myself? But it was like,
Also,
it was fun.
because of what I try to avoid in this book or in my writing in general is to like, I want to the characters reveal themselves by the way they talk and act. I don't want to say, well, he's arrogant and she's shy, and so I want that all to. I try to put as much in the dialogue as possible. So, yeah, and that's really hard to translate. I thought, but I think we did great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helped. I was told this at our other meeting is that I don't know for a fact, but when authors get translated into different languages, I often wonder what they think of it. For example, I brought the example, like, say this book were to be translated into Swedish. You don't speak Swedish, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you would get the book in Swedish, and you'd be like, well, I'm hoping someone did a good job. But because you have a background in English, you were able to look at these chapters I was writing, you were able to offer suggestions. And I think that helps a lot, because if you have no say in it,
I do write a lot. I do read a lot of translated books. I do read a lot of American literature, or from the UK, or from wherever. And the best ones are always when I forget that it's a translation, when it has a sound of its own. And so what happens at least in Germany, it happens a lot in the last, 10 years, is that books, like classic books, are newly translated. There's a new translation of them, and sometimes there were some where I had read the original translation and then the new translation, and where I really think, wow, the new translation is so much better. For example, there's so many examples. Jack London, Martin Eden, John Dos Passos, Manhattan Transfer, they're all newly translated, and you really see what a difference a good translation can make. Sometimes it's not even the fault of the original translators, it's just another time, and the language can... For example, one example also is, I saw it on the table, J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, was a big scandal when it came out, and I heard so much about it, and when I first read it, it was translated by Heinrich Böll, which is a very... It's a good author, but very Catholic. So he took a lot of the swear words and everything out. So I heard so much about it. Oh, it was a big scandal. And then when I first read it, when I was, 17, 18 or so, I was really disappointed, because I thought, like, wow, yeah, this is some nasty stuff, I don't know. And it was really, I found it quite boring, I must admit. And then there was a new translation of that, and I read it, and all of a sudden, I read the original too. Then all of a sudden, I really got it. Didn't find it very disturbing, though. A while ago.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Then I have a question, maybe. What is a good book that's playing in Boston?
We were talking just in the car that you know about all the movies and music from it, but we don't know. So what can you recommend? What's a great book or story or that plays here? There's got to be some.
A book that takes place in Boston?
Yeah, that you can recommend.
That's a good question. I think
I'm sure there
I've
are
got to
tons
think
of
about that.
Yeah, exactly. And like he asked me that, and I was like, I'm sure with all the universities here, there's got to be a bunch. But
yeah, there are a lot of local authors, but many of the local authors have books that don't take place in Boston.
or maybe they don't say that it's Boston. I don't know. Yeah.
My idea was we have 8 readings, and 2 of them are one is at Stockton University, one at Georgetown, the other 6 are in bookstores, and I want to buy a book in all the bookstores, because I believe I will have great luck in my life then if I do that. Buy books preferably by local authors that maybe I wouldn't
local authors you might be able to help.
see. But still think about it. And,
Yeah, I'm gonna think about it.
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
Does it have to be a good book?
Preferably, yes.
What do you find is good?
No, right. Like it's Dennis Lehane. He does all of the.
I always wanted to read Dennis
Oh, yeah.
Lehane, but I never did. Is he from here? Or is he?
I think most of his books take place in the area. Yeah.
There you
Oh,
go.
there you go.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of good things about Dennis Lehane, but I never. Is it crime or?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but good crime, right? I mean,
Well, I feel like I've only seen the
spot.
movies.
okay, I'll watch the movie.
Yeah. I'm going to ask if there's no other questions. I want to thank Trident for hosting it. I mean, say what you want, but I remember, every single person, literally every single person who I told about a book tour, when they said, where? When I said, Trident. Trident? Get the hell out of here. Oh my God, that's the best. Like, people were...
I heard they're playing Modest and
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, like, my friends who have lived in Boston or spent out in Boston, and then, like, as I was, because I haven't been to Boston in a while. I used to come here kind of a lot, but that's when I was a student and had no money to buy books. So I stayed away from bookstores to not be heartbroken. And I also did, I did some research on these places, and one of the websites called Trident, the best independent bookstore in Massachusetts. So I was like, man, I think we got a good place to do a reading. He walked in and was blown away. So thank you for having us. Thank those of you who came out on this less than ideal day. So it means a lot.
Thanks to Tim for everything.
Thank you both for coming. This is
Yeah,
lovely.
thanks for hosting us. And
And
we'll
if-
be around to chat if you're interested.
Yeah.
And we have
books.
we do
If
have
you
books. I
want to
don't
buy
have
books.
I have them right here. If you're interested in buying a book, I do have them. We do have them for sale. Thank you.
Thank you.